your health promotion coordinator, and we're here today to make quinoa bowls. I personally like quinoa bowls. I think they make for a great lunch. It's a really great way to get all of your nutrients in and to really make your plate look like my plate. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take you through our ingredients before we go ahead and get started. So obviously to start off, we're gonna need our quinoa. I got this quinoa that was actually pre-washed, so that's really awesome. It saves time. If you go ahead and buy quinoa that does not specifically say that it is pre-washed, you have to wash it on your own. It has a very bitter taste, and that's how you get rid of the saponin, which it comes naturally in quinoa, but you just want to rinse it. It also helps get rid of any excess debris. All right. Then we are going to use ground turkey as our protein and our meat source today. If you are a vegetarian or you don't want to have meat or you just don't have meat, you can go ahead and eliminate it. It is full of beans and other vegetables, but I went ahead and I used ground turkey. I always try to get 93% lean, so 93.7, meaning that there's only 7% fat. And when you are cooking with meat, when you go to defrost it, make sure you put it in a plate or a bowl on the bottom of the fridge, so that way if juices were to run, it wouldn't run on any fresh produce that you may not cook. If you want to use red beef, you can go red meat, so beef. You can go ahead and use that as well. It's really your choice, your call on what you want to do with it. I then will be using bell peppers. So this one actually is the one that I need to chop. I went ahead and chopped 2 others just to save time, but I will be using 3 bell peppers. Any color. The package that I got ended up having 2 yellows and 1 red, so that's what we're working with. Then I will be using 4 cloves of garlic. You can use 3. These 2 were just kind of smaller, so I just chose to use 4 together. Traditionally, I would use 1 whole onion, but the onions when I had gone to the grocery store did not look the best. They were beginning to go bad, so I ended up picking up shallots. Shallots are kind of a cross between garlic and onion. They're in the same family. They aren't as pungent in the sense that they're not going to make you cry the way onions, green onions, leeks would make you cry. They have a more mild flavor, so a lot of people do actually prefer them to onions. Then for beans, I will be using cannellini beans and dark red kidney beans. However, if you want to use black beans, you can go ahead and do that. I recommend sticking with the kidney beans in here, but the other type of bean that I had in my house was cannellini, so that's what we're working with. And then quinoa is pretty dry, so I always make a light dressing to go with this, and I use extra virgin olive oil. You can use either apple cider vinegar or the juice of a whole lemon or a whole lime. A little bit of honey just to kind of counteract the tartness from the lemons or your citrus and the vinegar. And then for spices, I'll be using paprika, cayenne pepper, and cumin. And then to top this off, you can use any toppings that you may have. I traditionally would put in avocados, but again, the avocados were hard as a rock or already overripe, so they weren't very good. I chose guacamole. With this, you'll just put a scoop on or a dollop on top right before you go to eat it. When you are choosing anything that's already pre-made, you want to make sure that you read the ingredients list just to make sure that you know what's in there, and you look at the nutritional content in the information. And then last but not least, I will be topping this off with some shredded cheese. I have Mexican style cheese. You can kind of use whatever you'd like if you just want plain cheddar, but I like having the blend, so I chose to use that. And I don't have much left, so it probably would only serve about 2 anyway. All right, we're gonna go ahead and wash our hands and get started. Whenever you're handling food, you wanna make sure that you're practicing proper hygiene. So that means that you wash your hands for 20 seconds. That's what the CDC recommends. When you do wash your hands, you wanna wash around your wrists, in between your fingers, and under your fingernails. Make sure you're using warm soapy water. Doesn't have to be too hot. You don't wanna burn your hands. And you do wanna make sure that you are using plenty of soap. So I went ahead and already did that, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. To start off, we're gonna measure 1 cup of dry quinoa. So I just follow the directions that actually come on the back of the quinoa package. They all vary slightly, but I just follow that, and it always works out. So this package calls for 1 cup. I have just a little bit left in this bag, and then I'll open the other one. So I'm just measuring it in here. As I mentioned, this quinoa, it says pre-washed, saves time. I had to make sure you could see it in the camera there. If your quinoa does not specifically state that it is pre-washed, for you to save time, you want to make sure that you actually wash it on your own. That removes any saponin on it. So saponin is actually naturally found in quinoa. It's what helps keep pests away from it as it's growing, because it does have a bitter flavor. That being said, if we eat it and we taste the bitter flavor, we're probably not gonna like it very much. As humans, you don't enjoy something that's too bitter, which is why they recommend washing your quinoa beforehand. But this has already been washed and it's great, it's easy, saves time, which I think is one thing that everybody wants to do. Quinoa is one of those grains that has gained popularity in recent years. It's touted as a super grain. A lot of people like it because it has more protein in it compared to your rice. It's more versatile. You can put it in things like quinoa bowls, you can put it in salad. And it's pretty inexpensive. It honestly comes out to be around the same price as rice. So I think that's one of the big reasons why people love it so much. Like rice, quinoa is one of those things that does multiply once you cook it. So a little bit does go a long way. A lot of people might think that 1 cup wouldn't be enough, but in reality, it serves 6 to 8 people. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this in our pot. All right, so here's our pot. This might seem a little bit big, but I'm a huge fan of 1-pot meals where you cook everything in one and you have less to clean up. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put this in here. We'll use this pot later on. So there's our 1 cup of quinoa. And then according to the back of the package, you're gonna wanna add in 1.5 cups of water. If you wanna use it if you wanna cook it with broth, so if you want just a little bit more protein, you don't want the water. Sometimes people even like the flavor of broth. You can go ahead and add in broth instead. I'm just using tap water. I measured it out, so we have 1.5 cups here, and I'm gonna go ahead and pour it in. And then we will go ahead and place this on the stove. You're gonna wanna bring it to a boil, and just as the package says, once it's done, once you've brought it to a boil, you're going to want to simmer it over low heat for about 15 minutes. And then when it's done, you'll take it off of the heat. You'll let it just sit covered for around 5 minutes, and then you'll fluff it up with a fork before serving it. We aren't going to serve it right away. We're then going to mix it in at the end once we're done cooking everything else, but we'll begin putting it in the bowl. So I will take you over to my stove. All right, so I am turning my stove on. I probably will start off with it at a 7, so kind of in between medium to high heat. And I'll just stir it a little bit. You don't have to do too much, you just don't want it to really stick. I didn't realize I wasn't really filming. You don't have to do too much, you just really don't want it to stick. So stir it a little bit. And then I will be back once it begins to boil so I can show you what we do when we cover it. Okay, we're over our quinoa. You can probably see the steam beginning to form and it's beginning to boil. That's what those bubbles are. So at this point, we are going to cover it and simmer it over low heat. So we're gonna go ahead and reduce the heat, and I'll get the cover. Okay, so we're gonna time it for 15 minutes. I have the timer going on my phone. So we're gonna go ahead and prep our last pepper. I went ahead and washed this beforehand. Whenever you're using fresh produce, you wanna make sure that you wash it. A lot of people will touch peppers or will touch the fresh produce. Even though I got mine in a package, just washing it gives me peace of mind. So to start off, I'm just going to cut out the top. Some people even just slice the top of the pepper off, depending on what you wanna save or what you wanna use. And then you'll go ahead and remove the seeds. Fun fact about bell peppers, so whether you get a green bell pepper or a red bell pepper, it is still the same bell pepper. the red bell peppers are further on in maturity. So your red bell peppers are going to be your ripest, your sweetest bell peppers. Green bell peppers, for anyone who's had them, they're a little more bitter. They just don't really have flavor, actually. They tend to absorb the flavor of things around them in the dish. So they're really great if, I mean, you could put them in a quinoa bowl. I'm personally not a green pepper, like I don't love green peppers. I'll eat them on pizza or something if there's a lot of flavor. But I tend to like your yellow, orange, or red. And that's kind of, it goes from green to yellow to orange to red. So bell peppers are chock full of vitamin C, which is great. That's something that I think everyone looks to get more of. And so they're a fun, easy way to get it. And the nice thing about bell peppers is they're very versatile. You can eat them cooked, you can eat them raw. For example, you can have them with hummus, or if you want to put them in stir fries, they're a great option in there too. So this is what the inside of the pepper looks like. I was able to get most of the seeds out when I just kind of removed the top piece. The white pieces that are a little more foamy in texture, those are just their veins. They are edible. Those are a little bitter. I don't recommend eating them, but they're not going to hurt you if you do eat them. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out and take out any seeds that might be left, and then I will just chop them up. You can chop them up as finely or as thick as you'd like. That's up to your personal preference. Mine all came out to be around 1/4 inch sizes, no more than 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop those up. When you are purchasing bell peppers, you wanna make sure that they are firm in consistency and they don't have any brown spots, or I guess any spots at all on them. That's how you know that you're getting the freshest bell pepper possible. So I have finished chopping up my bell peppers. The nice thing about quinoa is that it needs to cook, and so it gives you time to kind of prep everything else so you don't feel like it takes forever. All right, so while our quinoa is still cooking, we're gonna go ahead and begin peeling and chopping our garlic and our shallot. With the garlic, I do recommend mincing it. You can, some people buy minced garlic from the store. I like just chopping my own because I like buying the full head. If you've watched any of my other videos, I talk about why I like buying the head. Part of it is for cost. The other part is I feel like when you buy fresh garlic or like the whole head of garlic, I feel like it just has a little bit more flavor to it. But I do understand for a convenience factor, some people just really enjoy buying the already minced garlic. So the way that I remove the peel off of the clove is I just take the knife and I cut off the end, and then I will kind of smash the knife on top of it with the flat side up, which I can demonstrate for you to see. All right, so I'll cut the end of my garlic off. See, the end is cut off. And then I always get a small paper towel that I put the peels on, just because garlic tends to get sticky, and there's nothing worse than having your peels and your minced garlic all mushed together. So then I'm gonna take the flat side of my knife, put it down, and just smash. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and then if you can see it, it just peels off pretty easily right here. So, and it kind of helps you already begin the mincing process. There you go. So our quinoa is now sat for 15 minutes. It's not the clearest picture, but I don't want to remove the lid because I'm supposed to then remove this from the heat. So I'm going to turn my stove off and move it to a different burner, just one that wasn't on, to cool off, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. The remaining 5 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead, it probably won't take me the full 5, or it might, but I'm gonna mince up the last clove of garlic, and I'll just show you how I go ahead and mince it. Go ahead and cut the clove lengthwise, which I already did, and then I'll cut it again this way, and then just kind of take the knife and chop it around, which I'll show you. So, kind of chop it that way. Careful not to get your fingers. All right, and then I honestly just take my knife and move it around like this. Careful not to lose any pieces. My cutting board has some ridges in it, so. And then I always scrape it off the knife and repeat the process. So that's how I mince my garlic. It's nothing super fancy. If you had a food processor, you could mince it in there, but yeah, nothing too terribly difficult, nothing super fancy. My knife does the trick. And then I'm just gonna scoop it off and put it in my pile here of minced garlic. All right, so we're gonna prep our shallot. Again, kind of like the garlic, I'm just gonna go ahead and chop off the bottom and then chop off the top. So when you're buying onions, garlic, shallots, you wanna make sure that the skin is not dull and papery, it kind of has a little bit of a shine to it. You don't want any brown spots in it. If you do, don't buy it if you see it that way. Unlike an onion with the shallot, you don't have to necessarily remove that first layer. I just remove like the paper skin piece. Shallots, so I looked this up. Shallots are actually an allium, so they're in the same family as onions, but like I mentioned earlier, they have a different flavor. They kind of have the flavor of a cross between garlic and onion. So this is what the inside of a shallot looks like. It almost looks like you have just a large clove, you know, and there's 3 pieces to it. And so I'm just gonna go ahead, there's a little bit more of the papery piece in here. I'm gonna go ahead and remove that until you see the purple, so it will resemble a purple onion. And then I have to repeat that on this half. The nice thing about onions, garlic, shallots is that they do keep for a decent chunk of time if you store them in a cool, dark place. So some people, if you have root cellars, that's where they'll store it. I don't have a root cellar, so I just store mine in the vegetable drawer in the fridge. And they can keep for definitely 1 to 2 weeks. After that, the paper might begin to get a little bit like ragged and just brittle. That's the word I'm looking for. Brittle and fall apart, but you definitely want to make sure that the inside is okay. If it is, then you can go ahead and eat it. So this, I don't have to mince the way we mince the garlic. I'm just gonna kind of cut it in thin little rounds. So they're gonna be about 1/8 thick in diameter. I don't even know if that's a full 1/8, but that's what we're gonna wanna cut it to. And so I am just gonna go ahead and put that in the pile with the garlic. As soon as the quinoa comes out, I'm gonna go ahead and actually put the shallots and the garlic in the pot and kind of saute those first before adding the ground beef, or in this case, turkey. The reason I do that is because the flavors can be really potent, and so I don't like my vegetables, like my peppers, to be super overcooked. I kind of throw them in there for a few minutes and then remove it. And so if I waited to keep the onions in there, my goodness, these are, whew, these shallots. All right, I need to wash my hands again because I just touched my eye. Okay, so a few tips really quick. One, when your eyes do begin to water after you're cutting onions or shallots in this case, don't touch your eyes directly with your hands, because it'll sting if you touch them with the part of your hand that has been touching the onion. Also, if you're wearing makeup, it will smudge and you'll kind of look like a raccoon. So if you are cutting onions, I recommend not wearing eye makeup. And on that note, we're gonna go ahead and remove our quinoa because it has been 5 minutes now, so we'll go ahead and fluff it and take it out. All right, so I'm just gonna fluff it with a fork like it said. I try not to scratch the bottom of the pot with the fork. Really, the only reason you fluff it is so that it's not clumped together. So this might have seemed like it was a little bit of a process, But you can actually buy the way they have minute rice. They do have minute, not quite minute, but they have quick cook quinoa that you could make in your microwave. Or you could make some of this ahead of time and just have it ready to go. If you're ever in a pinch and you need something quick to eat, instead of going out and buying food and getting fast food, you could go ahead and just make this. It is truly fast food. So now that I have fluffed the quinoa, I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the bowl. Okay, so now that our quinoa's in the bowl, our pot is empty, and it's time for us to put in our shallots and our garlic. So just so that it doesn't burn, I pour about a tablespoon of olive oil in the pot. I honestly just kind of eyeball it at this point because this one isn't a precise science. And that's so that it doesn't stick. All right, so I'm just gonna try to get this in the camera. I'm gonna go ahead and pour this into the pot. And when you cook it, the cooking times kind of vary depending on the heat that you use. I'll use medium heat, so on my stove with the numbers, it's a 6. But you want to cook it until the onion, or in this case the shallot, begins to caramelize. And you'll notice when it's beginning to caramelize, the color will change. They'll become more translucent. And it'll definitely also begin to smell, like you can tell from the smell. Okay, yep, this is now beginning to caramelize. So I'm gonna get the rest of it off the knife and bring you over to my stove. So here's the number. I put it on a 6. And then I am just going to stir until it begins to get brown and caramelize. So I will see you when I'm about to add in the ground meat. So in our case, this is what our onions and garlic look like when they're caramelized. And I will go ahead and add in the ground turkey is in our pot, and I'm just gonna go ahead and cook this until it reads an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have a meat thermometer, you're gonna wanna poke it in a few different places because the ground turkey will end up breaking up and it's not like a solid piece of meat. You're gonna wanna measure the temperature in both smaller clumps of meat, so smaller chunks, and larger chunks to make sure that they've all cooked to that internal temperature of 165. So we'll see you when it's done. So our ground turkey browned, and it's ready to go. The last thing I'm gonna do is add in the peppers. So in this bowl, I have the bell peppers that I chopped up earlier, and then I have the kidney beans and cannellini beans. I went ahead and already rinsed these. Even though I chose beans that said they were low sodium, you still wanna make sure that you go ahead and rinse them in a colander as soon as you open it, just to make sure that you try to get as much of that sodium off. A lot of Americans tend to consume more sodium than what is actually needed in their diet. So if there's any way to try to eliminate it, that's great. So sometimes people actually wonder how you know if you've rinsed the beans well enough. One of the things that I look for is kind of the suds. So when you first put the beans in the colander and you begin rinsing them under cold water, it almost looks like there's some suds that get produced. That's completely fine. I rinse until there's no more suds that are produced in the colander, and it only takes like 1 to 2 minutes, and then we're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and add these into our pot with the ground turkey and then the shallots and garlic, and just kind of cook it for a little bit before putting it in our quinoa. All right, so here's our pot, and I'm just stirring everything together. As I mentioned earlier, I really don't like it when my peppers are super mushy, so I just kind of want to cook them a little bit, but I still like having that slight crunch. That's partially why we began sauteing the onions earlier. So I will cook here until this is ready to go. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pour them into the bowl with the quinoa. Try to get it in the picture. And then once you get it in here, you're gonna just wanna lightly mix it around, so almost like you're tossing a salad, but not really. And then we'll go ahead and make our dressing. Okay, so some people would choose not to make a vinaigrette or a dressing for it, and they'd use things like salsa, and that adds quite a bit of moisture to it. I like having an olive oil based vinaigrette for it. That way I can make it on my own. If you can make homemade salsa, that's great. I highly recommend it. I just feel like it's also a little bit lighter, and it kind of goes with everything. So we're gonna start off by measuring out a 1/2 cup of olive oil in our measuring cup. And you just want to make sure that the dip, so like the meniscus, is at the 1/2 cup. Okay. And then if we had a lemon or a lime, we would use the juice of a whole lemon or lime. I don't have those, so we're going to use 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Apple cider, well, vinegar and oil just in general are going to separate, so you're going to want to make sure you mix it really well, but that's going to be our little bit of acid in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and use a 1/2 teaspoon of paprika. And so as of now, we hadn't seasoned the quinoa or the vegetables, so our seasoning also comes in the form of the vinaigrette. You can choose to add some salt to this too, due to the fact that I am using canned beans, even though I rinsed them, and I'll be using cheese. I'm gonna choose to omit the salt, but you could put in about 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt too, or more to taste. All right, and so this was a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cayenne. And then last but not least, a 1/2 teaspoon of cumin. You don't want a heaping teaspoon, and right now that's all I seem to be getting. Okay. I have a fork that I'm just gonna use to whisk it together. And then once that is all whisked, I'm also gonna go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of honey actually. All right, so I'm adding in my 2 tablespoons of honey. And this is just to balance out the acidity from the vinegar, just the slightest bit. You really don't taste it in the actual quinoa bowl. All right, and so as that's draining in there, I'm just gonna go ahead and mix that together, and then once it's mixed, I'll pour it over the quinoa. All right, so I'm just gonna take the vinaigrette now and pour it over the quinoa, and this will just kind of help it not be as dry. And then mix that together. The quinoa's already kind of absorbing it. All right, and then you can go ahead and serve it with, if you find fresh avocados then that are good, I really recommend putting those in there. If not, you can serve it with some guac, just a little bit of shredded cheese. And even if you like salsa, you can use salsa. As our final product, we have our grain or our carb, which is our quinoa. We have our protein, which is found in both the cheese, the beans, and then most importantly, the ground turkey or whatever meat you choose to use. We have color from the peppers, like our vegetables, and the beans, obviously the kidney beans add some color. Cheese is dairy, and then we even have the guacamole. So your avocado there, if you could find whole avocados, I recommend using those too, that are just good. You don't want to buy an avocado just to buy it. So I hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed following along. This is a really quick, easy, and simple lunch. I like to make it and just have a bunch ready for the week. So meal prep and take it to lunch with me at work when we are back in work and we're not home for quarantine. Now I can just take it out of my fridge. Let us know how you make it. A great option would be to add in some corn if you like that, or to change up the beans if you want black beans instead of cannellini beans. If you use different colored peppers, let us know. Well, however you make it your own, and be sure to tag us at UND Wellness. Have a great day. Bye.